How much better off would we be as students and academic researchers if we could just forget the hype about AI writing tools and instead learn the writing skills that are needed to write a good literature review?
The future of learning is here, and it's called ChatGPT.
A new era of AI for research has begun.
Enter artificial intelligence, better known as AI.
AI tools.
AI tools.
Generative AI.
Generative AI.
Generative AI.
AI is here and AI is here to stay. It's amazing.
It seems like every day there's a new AI writing tool that promises to cut down the amount of time it takes to conduct and write up academic research.
Using AI.
I'm using generative AI.
Using AI tools at every single step.
Proofreading, editing, finding research papers, writing outlines.
It's all taken care for you.
And to be fair, these tools do offer some conveniences, especially when it comes to writing literature reviews.
If you're doing your literature review and you just want to do it as fast as possible,
you will be able to do that in a fraction of a time.
Automate this process.
Automate your literature review writing.
I'll be honest, writing a literature review is a thankless task. They're often considered a boring but necessary part of writing up academic research, something you do as an afterthought. And the final result is often criticized and never praised. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you were reading an academic report and thought to yourself, wow, this literature review is very well written? They're boring. And on the flip side, the literature review is usually one of the main targets of criticism whenever an article is going through peer review. So it's totally understandable that there are so many academics these days who have been outsourcing the writing of literature reviews to these AI writing tools. And with all the money that's been flowing into AI industries lately, it's no wonder that there are so many influencers who have sold their souls to these companies and have been flooding you with content about how to use the latest AI writing tool to do your academic research.
Feels like cheating.
Cheat, do their assignments, they're not going to learn.
Cheating is not unethical.
But as an English professor, let me tell you that they are not fooling anyone. I mean, think about it. Academics, we read and write for a living. It's how we buy our food. It's how we keep the lights on. Hello? The editors of the journals that you want to publish in know the difference between quality academic research and the glib text that's just being churned out by the latest AI writing tool. And if that difference isn't obvious to you, then you don't stand a chance of getting published in any high impact journal. The fact is that good literature reviews are not just lists of previous research. Instead, they all share one quality in common. So in today's video, I'm going to reveal that quality, show you how you can use it in different types of literature reviews, and then I'm going to share with you some real examples of common criticisms about literature reviews that come up in peer review. To start though, we need to work out what kind of academic writer you are to make sure that you know how to use everything I'm about to teach you. So let me ask you a question. Are you a researcher or a scholar? Researchers are your typical graduate students. They're all finished with coursework and they're really excited about starting their own independent research. Of course, they do have some knowledge of the field and previous research that has happened, but they haven't gone into it too in depth because they're too excited about starting their own research and making a dent in their own academic field. For that reason, researchers typically write their literature reviews after they've done their experiment. It's a kind of afterthought, something that they have to write in order to get the entire research report published. Scholars, on the other hand, do have an in-depth understanding of the field and all the research that's previously been done on a given topic. They can also see the connections between them. They know all the shortcomings and limitations and implications of all the research, and they're able to use this research to guide the design of future experiments. For that reason, scholars will typically write their literature review before they conduct their research, before they've even designed the experiment, because they know that a literature review serves as the basis of quality research. In a world of researchers, be a scholar. Amateur academics behave like researchers. They consider the real meat and potatoes of the study to be their own research, and the literature review is just a kind of catalog of all the previous research that's been done, something you have to kind of churn out in order to get your own paper published. And if that's your take, if that's what you think a literature review is, then go ahead and use one of these AI writing tools to compose it for you. It doesn't matter because nobody's going to read it. But the academics who are publishing quality research, that which advances the collective understanding of the discourse community, are the scholars, the ones who understand that the literature review is the first step to quality academic research. So that's why in the Writing Center at my university, we're always telling graduate students that in order to become a researcher, you have to first become a scholar. But in order to become a scholar, you've got to know what type of literature review is right for you. You know how in academic research, you've got to make sure that the methodology is appropriate for your research question to make sure you're using the right tools to gather that data? Well, the same thing is true in academic writing. Before you write the literature review, you've got to consider what methods you'll use to gather and synthesize past research. You've got to think about things like, are you going to cover only the most recent studies because that's the current state of the field? Or are you going to try to give an exhaustive summary of all the research that's been done on a given topic? Are you going to spend time looking at the different controversies and disagreements in the field? Are you going to be putting each piece of research under the microscope and showing what's wrong with it, critiquing it? Or are you just going to kind of list the major findings from each of these studies? And how are you going to lay all of this out? Is it going to be chronologically by time? Or are you going to be grouping these studies by their points of view or even the countries where they were conducted? These are all things you're going to have to think about when you are planning out your literature review. But to make things simple, let's just take a look at probably the most common type of literature review, which is called the narrative literature review. That's where the writer basically chooses whichever research he thinks is relevant to the current study. It's loose. It's not so important that the writer covers all the research that's been done on a given topic. He just basically chooses whichever ones he thinks will help develop the background of his research and organizes them into some coherent pattern. And to help you write your own narrative literature review, we're going to take a look at some real examples of common criticisms that have come up for literature reviews in peer review. But first, let's take a quick look at 3 other types. Systematic literature reviews are a lot more strict than the narrative type, and they usually include the criteria that was used for selecting the research. This is something like the methods section in a scientific report. It includes detailed information about the methodology so that if another writer were to come and try to write the same systematic literature review and follow the same methods, they would wind up writing essentially the same report. And that is supposed to make the research a lot more objective and eliminate author bias because it prevents writers from just selecting research from their own friends or peer group. There are different use cases for this type of literature review, but it's definitely more common in the health sciences where clinicians need to integrate research into their practice. Next up is the meta-analysis, which brings together data from multiple studies that have all examined the same research question. But what makes the meta-analysis unique is that it doesn't merely catalog these previous studies, but instead it uses statistical methods to draw out findings across all studies. And finally, there are some literature reviews that focus only on one particular aspect of previous research, like the methodology or bibliography. So let's say, for example, you are a graduate student who is preparing to conduct some of your own research. Your supervisor might ask you to begin by conducting a methodological literature review in which you examine the designs, methods, and approaches that have been used in the past on the same topic. After conducting such a focused literature review, you're going to be in a good position to identify where the holes are and what new methodologies should be used in designing your experiment. For a second example, at my university, we often ask graduate students to write a bibliographic literature review before beginning work on their dissertation. This kind of lit review ensures that students have an in-depth understanding of the field before they set out on their own research, and essentially makes sure that they are scholars before they become researchers. That's what a bibliographic literature review can do for you. And that in-depth understanding is what AI writing tools will never give you. So now that you've ditched the AI writing tools and have transformed from a researcher into a scholar, you're ready to write. But there are still a few common mistakes that come up again and again in literature reviews, so I thought I would just save you the pain of peer review by pointing them out to you now. Let's take a look at these 5 examples of real comments from peer review about literature reviews to see if they would apply as well to your literature review. Your literature review mainly lists past research papers without highlighting their relative importance. It shows that you've done a lot of research, but it lacks clarity on which studies are most and least important. This makes it difficult to understand your perspective. Your review is presented in chronological order. That's suitable for a textbook, but not as an introduction to your research. Your selection and description of past research should be influenced by your research hypothesis, but I don't see any relationship between the two. It's important to more clearly highlight the relevant themes and issues. Your review starts with theoretical aspects, referencing well-known theorists, and then moves to practical, recent empirical studies. Currently, there's a lack of clear connection between these two sections. It's challenging, but necessary, to create coherence between them. The review appropriately details each relevant research piece, but it reads like a collection of separate summaries. It requires a more overarching approach that evaluates and interconnects these studies. Conducting interdisciplinary reviews is hard, and I understand your struggle. Yet, your review remains confined within traditional disciplinary limits. For innovation, it's essential to draw more links between different disciplines, revealing new connections and relationships you aim to establish. So if you want to avoid these common mistakes, then here are some pro tips that you can use in writing your literature review. 1. Don't just summarize, synthesize. Remember, AI writing tools are language producing machines. They're not thinking machines, and they will never be a substitute for what is the most important quality of literature reviews, which is evidence of an organizing mind at work. So make sure that your literature review goes beyond summarizing previous research. Make sure that you analyze it and show the connections between these pieces of research and how they relate to your study. This is something that can only be done by a mind like yours. Second, set your priorities. You need to make value judgments about what research is more important and less important in your literature review. AI writing tools will be able to spit out a list of all the relevant research, but they'll never be able to make decisions such as what's more important and what's less important. That is only something that can be done by an organizing mind at work, such as your own. Third, push the boundaries. Look for connections outside your own discipline. Combining insights from various fields can lead to new innovations and understandings in your own research area. Another one of the criticisms talked about how the literature review was organized chronologically, which made it read more like a textbook. So in order to avoid that kind of criticism on your literature review, you need to go check out this video next, because it's going to give you the different patterns of organization you can use in writing your literature review. So be sure to go check it out.